program goals. These are our set out objectives, if you will. Our strategy and highlights from the bond program, the selection process itself, we'll review that. And then, of course, the City Council's approved projects, the 5 propositions that'll be on the ballot, and of course, the bond program schedule moving forward. So, taking a look at our program goals, this is what we always look back to as a test. It's our litmus test, if you will, that once we've developed a program, we go back and review it against these stated goals. So we want to maintain and improve existing infrastructure and address equity. We want to provide mobility and city services in those growth areas. The 2020 census revealed that we had about a 24% growth rate since 2010 over that 10-year span. Particularly in the northwest sector of the city, we had a 76% growth rate. So we're still actively growing. Enhanced our active transportation recreational corridors, allow for some flexibility and partnership opportunities, and of course, achieve balance and fiscal stewardship. We're trying to balance our operating and our capital budget. So we want to make sure if we build something new, we've got operating and maintenance costs that are going to go along with the life of that facility. So we either got to staff it, keep the lights on, et cetera. A little bit about our strategy. On the capital delivery side, we dedicated about $29.8 million specifically to transportation and park being a small portion of that related to the design elements for the Forest Park pool replacement. But the balance of this would go towards our arterial projects, where we can go out and do some early design work, secure some right-of-way, at least know where that right-of-way is at so we can better accelerate the delivery of this capital, because we still have Encore and other franchised utilities that need to relocate and move out of the way before we even get started. Our debt capacity, we've still got some debt capacity beyond the $560 million that's programmed for this 2022 bond program. But we need to reserve some. We're going to have emergency situations. We'll have partnership opportunities that will come up outside of the bond cycle. We also might have grant match opportunities that we need to capitalize on. Some of the highlights, well, we've got $365 million programmed for streets and mobility. In addition to that, we have $71.6 million that came from Tarrant County bond funds. Tarrant County had a successful election in November of last year and committed to 4 arterial projects that we were going to do. So together, we're going to do them. And 1 grade-separated railroad crossing. We got another $59.8 million that comes from other funding sources the city had. Together, almost $500 million worth of streets and mobility improvement projects. On the park side, we've got $121 million in the bond program. Combine that with $13.2 million that we've got from partnership funds from third parties, another $3.9 million from other funding sources. Together, $138 million worth of park improvements, and no tax rate increase associated with this program. So how did we get here? How does a project get developed? Well, it comes from many different areas. Data collection and analysis. We're collecting data on a daily basis. We're looking at pavement condition indexes. We're looking at facility condition index. Where are these infrastructure in terms of their life cycle? Master plan and strategic goals. Guidance documents tells us how our capital planning needs to take place over the next 5, 10, 20 years. Development activity that's occurring. City Council waitlisted projects from previous bonds that didn't quite make it, ranked high, but we're putting forward on future bond programs. Service demands, public meetings, neighborhood meetings, boards and commissions, all that goes into play when developing a project. The selection process, we started with $1.3 billion worth of projects, so somehow we had to get that down to a $500 million program. That's what we initially started at. So we asked the departments, submit us your projects. It goes to a prioritization committee. That committee is made up of individuals from different departments around the city that are the first filter, if you will, of prioritizing those projects. We asked the departments, tell us how much it's going to cost, right? When do you need it delivered by? Are there O&M expenses associated with your project? So is it a new facility or expanding facility? It'll have additional operating and maintenance costs. Committee will take a look at that across the spectrum with about 10 applied criteria. One criteria that we used for this bond program that was absent from 2018 was equity. So we looked no further than the Fort Worth Task Force on Race and Culture for inspiration on how we could answer that or best address equity. So we asked the basic questions, really simple. Does the project eliminate or reduce racial, and cultural disparities? Does it lie within or adjacent to a majority-minority area or super-majority-minority area? Majority-minority area is really just a census block with a minority population of 50% or greater. A supermajority-minority area is one that's 75% or greater. And of course, we applied all the other criteria. Does it collaborate with other projects? Are they sharing resources? Are there leverage opportunities? This one we had a significant amount of leverage opportunity from the county. Does it address service delivery? Do we have deficiencies that need to be addressed? Is it a capital replacement, something that's gone beyond its useful life? Does it address health and safety concerns? Are there state or federal or contractual mandates that require us to add additional funding for the bond program? And of course, we take all that to management with our first shot at prioritization for their look at it, asking more questions, filtering process even more, and then ultimately on to City Council. City Council will review and provide some input on what's presented to them, and ultimately say, let's take it out to the community and let's get some feedback. And so we did, spent the latter part of last summer, early fall, doing just that. And of course, the final project list is developed, and on February 8th of this year, City Council approved an ordinance calling for the election. So, subsequent to the public input, we realized heavy emphasis on arterials, especially added capacity projects. More importantly, all our streets and mobility, heavy on everybody's mind. So we added $45.5 million to what was scheduled to be a $500 million bond program. Park and recreation improvements, $8.1 million. Principally to the Forest Park Pool replacement, Stop 6 aquatic facilities, essentially enlarging those facilities, increased funding for the Botanic Gardens, and of course we added another project, Oak Grove Park. And then on the facility side, we added $3.6 million, principally to land acquisition. We've seen costs over the last couple of years continue to rise, and we wanted to account for that, related to 2 fire station replacements. So today we're at $560 million bond program, 2/3 of which goes to streets and mobility infrastructure improvements, another quarter of it to park and recreation improvements, and the rest dispersed to police and fire, public library, and then our natural area and open space. So what you'll see on the ballot is, it'll be titled Fort Worth Proposition A. It'll be streets and mobility infrastructure improvements at $369 million. The map just kind of identifies the location of where those key arterial projects, grade separated crossing, the established corridors in our neighborhood streets. So what our emphasis is added network capacity for arterials and intersections, sidewalks, bicycle lanes, safety improvements, key focus, neighborhood school safety, our high injury network or Vision Zero program, bridges, streetlights, and then again, maintaining and improving our existing network of established corridors, upgrades to traffic signals, and our neighborhood street rehabilitation program. This gives you the list by project category, and along with the associated funding highlighted in green on the $369 million. Tarrant County, as I mentioned earlier, 71.6. And then, of course, those other funds from sources funding the city already had, in transportation impact fees, future improvement agreements, previous bonds at 59.8, and again to $497 million. So highlighted in green on this chart are the added capacity projects. We started out with 9 arterial projects. We've moved to 14. So we've added 5 out of the public meetings. And you can see the 2022 bond fund amount at about $145 million. Add in the Tarrant County, add in the other funding sources. We added Bailey Boswell from 157 to Horseman Road. Now, some of these are going to be design and right-of-way only. We want to be able to design the project, select and secure the right-of-way. So if we know that in advance, we're able to accelerate delivery of this project sooner rather than later. You can go to the city's website and there'll be additional detail about each one of these projects. This map just shows you the arterial projects that are planned. It's only showing the north half of the city. Again, that's where we're seeing the highest amount of growth and the highest need for our arterial projects. Intersections, again, centralized down to the southwest. our established corridors to support transit. We've got $10 million assigned to Lancaster Avenue between Jones Street and Hanley Drive. And these are really just corridor improvements that we want to focus on pedestrian and bicycle, really the interface between the vehicular traffic and all other modes of transportation. Same with East Berry and McCart Avenue, $2.5 million for each, really for design only, but we may have an opportunity to also collect some right-of-way along the way. On safety and mobility, our Vision Zero program, really what we're trying to do here is take those fatalities to zero. So we want to reduce those severe injuries or fatalities, take them to zero, and hence the name Vision Zero program. $5 million dedicated to that effort. It would be to address all modes of transportation, from pedestrian, bicycle to vehicular, in those top 10 corridors. We know where they're at. We have the statistics for those. The question is, what type of improvements can we make in each one of those corridors? So we have a consultant that's helping out our Transportation and Public Works with determining the type of improvements that could be made within those corridors, again, to reduce those fatalities to zero. Everman Parkway connector, south end of town. This is connecting 35 to Everman. There's a stretch of roadway in there that the county has agreed to participate in at about $13.5 million. So it's a design of a 4-lane divided thoroughfare. Most importantly, though, it's a grade separated crossing at the Union Pacific Railroad. A little bit too at Sycamore Creek, which also runs through there. Fort Worth Proposition B is park and recreation improvements. And again, the map just kind of shows you the general disbursement of those projects around the city. Again, Fort Worth Proposition B, these are the project types, totaling up to $123,955,000. Now, it also includes the public art component. So for transportation projects, it'd be 1%. For all other propositions, with the exception of natural space and natural area and open space, which has no public art participation. And you can see the partnership funds at about $13.2 million. The other funds, the $2 million, will be some gas well revenue, another $486,000 for with park dedication fees. What's interesting is when we added Oak Grove, we took $3 million from the planned $5 million project for Sycamore Park. We added it to Oak Grove. In doing so, we came back in with $2 million worth of funding from gas well revenue, again, to bring the total project cost up to about $4 million. We added another $486,000 to the $3 million that we added to Oak Grove to bring it to $3.4 million. So Botanic Garden infrastructure improvements. A couple of years ago, we entered into an agreement with Botanic Research Institute of Texas, a contractual obligation, where they're from now on going to maintain and operate the Botanic Gardens. When we turned it over to them, we turned it over to them with infrastructure that was degrading or at the end of its useful life. We committed in that contract to put forward in future bond programs funding to help replace some of those aging infrastructure. This is $7 million to help with that effort. Heritage and Paddock Park renovation and site improvements. Heritage Park sits on the north end of the downtown, the convergence of Main Street. If you go out there today, it's got a chain link fence around it. Can't even access the park. We need to go back in and do substantive design and reconstruction of those improvements, along with Paddock Park and some streetscape improvements so we can make it more pedestrian-friendly environment and integrate that with the park. Fort Worth Water Gardens, built in 1971. It's undergone some limited renovations over the years. But what's happened is a lot of that vegetative growth out there and those root systems have found their way into the plumbing, the filtration system, the electrical systems, and degraded those. Things that you can't see, they're below ground, but are in desperate need of renovation or replacement. And that's $6.5 million to that effort. Our drainage and erosion control and pond dredging projects, about $7.1 million. You can see the disbursement of the projects around the city. This is significant dam replacements or pond dredging. You know, some of this we use for stormwater detention. As that thing silts up, it reduces our stormwater carrying capacity. This, again, comes back in and drains, removes some of the sediment. Meadowbrook Golf Course renovation, much like we did with Rockwood Golf Course from the 2014 bond, we want to go back in and improve playability of the golf course. by adjusting tees, fairways, looking at some drainage improvements out there as well, golf cart paths, et cetera. We've got the Sycamore Park improvements that I mentioned earlier at $2 million, but again, there's additional funding from gas well revenue of another $2 million that'll be added to this. And that's the design and construction of those master plan park amenities. Sycamore Park was formerly Sycamore Golf Course. It was decommissioned about almost 4 years ago now. Went through a master planning effort in 2020. And so we've got a master plan park now. We want to come back in and construct some of those traditional community park improvements from trails, picnic facilities, security lighting, et cetera. Oak Grove Park. Oak Grove Park was purchased by the city in 2015. It's undeveloped, so this would go to, it's about 67 acres, so this would go to master planning, design, and construction of that park amenities. Stop 6 Aquatic Facility, $8.2 million. This would be a public pool, be located to the, adjacent to the Stop 6 Hub Community Center, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. But this is design and construction of an outdoor aquatic facility. We went from 4 to 8 lanes as outgrowth of the public meetings. They wanted to see a larger public pool. Same with Forest Park pool replacement. We've just started into the design phase of that Forest Park pool replacement. It was clear that the public wanted a larger pool, something more akin to what is out there today. So we enlarged it, lengthening the length of the pools and adding, I believe, 4 more lanes to get to 8. Echo Lake Park improvements. We acquired this from the county, 2017. They gave us the property, and what they gave us was a bunch of deteriorating infrastructure, a lot of playgrounds that weren't ADA compliant. This is to come back in and take that 41 acres and master plan and design and construction of our typical park amenities. It sits adjacent to our Worth Heights Community Center today. Gateway Park development. This is the continuation of the Gateway Park development. This will be an update to the master plan. We'll come back in with athletic fields, trails, skate park, some security lighting, redoing some parking lots, et cetera. Neighborhood park improvements, we have 8. So these are park reserves. These are undeveloped tracts of land that we've acquired over the years that need to be developed at some point in time with a park, with a neighborhood park. So this would be master planning, design, and construction of park amenities. One of which, West Haven Park, and I'll point it out, is one that was formerly Van Zant YMCA. We ended up acquiring that from the YMCA, removing the pool and other infrastructure out there. This is to come back in and master plan and develop it as a neighborhood park. Martin Luther King Park. Right now, MLK Community Center sits on this property. It's about 2.8, I think it's about 2.86 acres. We are going to remove Martin Luther King Community Center. We're going to redevelop where it's at today with a park. It is going to be replaced with the Stop 6 Hub Community Center. Stop 6 Hub Community Center, $17.5 million. It's a 28,000 square foot community center. It's going to be your traditional community center with all the recreational components to it, but we're going to add something. We're going to add a library to it. We're going to add space for social services for some of those providers, more of a one-stop shop, if you will, for the community. Fire Station Community Center was one of those in the 2018 that was between Diamond Hill and Forest Fire Station Community Center replacement. They were kind of neck and neck. And so we decided to go ahead. All the things that were wrong with it before are still wrong with it today. Went ahead and put it on the 2022 bond program. So we've got a 1928 vintage fire station that's been added on to over the years, and it looks like it. You know, it's added on to it as you needed programming, et cetera. We got a second floor, can access. It's not ADA compliant. We can't use it for programming needs. So it just doesn't fit the model today of our community centers. When we take down portions of the Fire Station Community Center, we're going to pay respect to the 1928 vintage fire station, at least components of that, and integrate that into the new design. So our Fort Worth Zoo, I mentioned contractual obligations. Well, Fort Worth Zoological Society, we have a contract with. They put all the exhibits, they maintain the zoo, they operate the zoo. Our commitment under that contract is that we will provide funding for the construction of utility infrastructure to support their new exhibits. Trail gap connections, this will be citywide. $5.5 million. Now, there's 3 areas that we're focusing on right now is Bomber Spur, Mistletoe Bridge to Forest Park, and Sycamore Creek Trail. Again, we're going to take this $5.5 million, we're going to try to leverage it as much as we can with other third-party agencies in order to maximize the amount of trail we can actually build. Fort Worth Proposition C is a new public library in the far northwest Fort Worth. What we're looking at is around Havendale, Haslett, at Sendera Ranch. In a 3-mile radius of where we're targeting for this library, we had 3,260 people call Fort Worth home within that 3-mile radius in a year of a pandemic. So that's what we gained in 2020. Right now, within that 3-mile radius, we're bumping up on 20,000 people. So this would go to land acquisition, design, and construction. We already have our land identified for this project, so hopefully we can secure and close on that land quickly and get started with this project. Fort Worth Proposition D is our police and fire public safety proposition. We've got 1 new police facility and 2 fire station replacements at $39.2 million. Fire Station 37, we moved on to its current site. I think it's at 4971 Ray Wright Road as a modular building. And then right adjacent to it, we built a metal building to hold the fire apparatus. Again, temporary building, moved on site in 1998. It's time to find it a permanent home. So that's $9.5 million. Fire Station 16 replacement, a little over $10 million. Okay, this is about a 57-year-old station that's at the end of its useful life. We've got the captain's quarters that actually is located in one of the fire apparatus bays. We've got the bay doors that we actually have to lower the suspension of the fire apparatus just to get it in the door. There's so many things wrong with it. We can't accommodate female firefighters with it. We can do no level of expansion or renovation to this building to make it right. You really just have to start all over again. So we're looking at putting it at a different location that meets the needs of the fire department. So we've got some land dollars allocated for this project as well. Police Northwest Patrol Division, $18.6 million. We already own the property. It's about 66 acres. West of Meacham at 3900 Angle Avenue. This is to build a 32,000 square foot facility to centralize, if you will, the Northwest Patrol Division. Right now, portions of them are housed at Hemp Hill, portions in the downtown, portions in the stockyard, and then, of course, across or on the east side of the airfield. They pay about $151,000 a year in rent. They can take that, they're taking that out of their operating costs right now. They can take that $151,000 and put it to other resources. So it kind of liberates them, if you will, from that lease obligation. Proposition E is our natural area and open space. So for 2021, the end of 2021, over the prior 3 years, we're losing 47 acres a week to development. That's greenfield to development. In 2022, which is only 6 months old in our fiscal year, we've lost 1,440 acres to development. This $15 million is go to secure some of that property that's most environmentally sensitive property that we have around the city to create an open space plan. We've already done that with a 50-acre purchase of Broadcast Hill. So many benefits associated with this. We can use it as passive recreational opportunities, improves air and water quality, et cetera. So here are the summary of propositions. I know I went through them really quickly. I would invite you to go online and get more detail about the 110 neighborhood street rehabilitation projects to see if your street actually appears on that. If it does not, reach out to Transportation and Public Works. It may already be on another list for a street rehabilitation and not necessarily a part of this bond program. So Proposition A, Fort Worth Proposition A, streets and mobility infrastructure, $369 million. Park and recreation improvements, Fort Worth Proposition B at $123. Public library improvements, Fort Worth Proposition C at $12.5. Police and fire public safety improvements, Fort Worth Proposition D, $39.3. And then, of course, natural area and open space Proposition E. So moving forward, right, from this day, all the way up, really all the way up to the election, we're going to be holding a series of public information meetings. Again, go to the website to determine where those might be in close proximity to you, and I encourage you to attend. April 25th is early voting. Again, there'll be more information on the website about where those locations are for early voting. May 7th is Election Day. So again, if you have any questions, I invite you again to visit the city's website to get more detail on each one of these projects.
You like to change the propositions.
Yes, those were set by City Council on February 8th. So all the projects that are in the propositions were set by. Mine? You don't hear anything? I'll get up here.
Roger offered to do this part, I should let him. So Roger's had a year and a half to perfect his presentation, so you'll have to bear with me. I'm not as dynamic a speaker as him on my best day. So after those 5 propositions on your ballot, Proposition A3 for the bonds, you will see, starting with Proposition F, 13 proposed charter amendments. Charter is not generally a topic that is particularly interesting. I'll do my best to get through it quickly and informatively. So as Roger said, back on February 8th, Council adopted the elections ordinances, both the bond election and the charter election. Charter election set for May 7th, excuse me. There are 13. Per state law, they have to be lettered, so they're F through Q. They pick up right where the bond ones left off. There are a total of 13. The one you've probably heard about is the mayor and council pay, and then there are 12 technical amendments. All 13 are topics that had previously in 2016 been sent to a charter review task force and recommended for inclusion on the election. 12 of those 13 did not make the prior ballot, so they're being picked up now. So as I said, the one you've probably heard about already is the pay for the mayor and council. What is proposed is, I'm not going to read the entire ballot language, but I do encourage you to read it closely when you're voting, that what's proposed is for the mayor's annual pay to be 1/2 of the average for the base rate salary for department heads, so it's across the city, and then for all the other council members to be 1/2 of the base rate salary for all of the assistant department heads. So currently, we have fixed numbers in the charter for those salaries for the pay. Mayor is $29,000. The other council members are $25,000. The other large cities in Texas that have a manager council form of government, so Austin, Dallas, San Antonio, their pay rate ranges for their council members from $45,000 up to $83,000, and for their mayors from $61,000 up to $97,500. So 29 and 25, obviously a little bit outside that scale. Rather than proposing a fixed number again, the suggestion was made to have it indexed, to say, let's make the salary tied to some other pay in the city, so that we don't have to, as time goes on and salary rates change, we don't have to go back out to the voters again. When we go out to the voters to hold an election, if the city's the only one on the ballot, it's about $500,000 for the city to hold an election. So this was kind of a way to try to address the issue, keep it in line with city pay, but also not have it fixed in a dollar amount where it requires going out repeatedly as they become stale. So as I said, for the mayor, 1/2 of the department head. For the other council members, 1/2 of the assistant department head. So if this were adopted, then as the council adopts and reviews the budget for each year, they would actually set their salaries. They'd look at what the actual base rate pay is for all of the department heads and assistant department heads in that coming year, and it would be 1/2 of the average of those. It's an index, so it changes from day to day because, for example, our Human Resources Department ran numbers on January 18th, and based on those numbers, the salaries would have been, the pay for the mayor would have been $99,653, and the pay for the city council members, I'm sorry, yes, $99,653, and for the other council members would have been $76,727. They ran those numbers again today, and as of the people who are in those positions today, Mayor would be 99,967, so up a little bit, and the council members would be 74,520, so down a little bit. Again, it'll be a point-in-time calculation each year as the budget is adopted. So the other key point when you're looking at a charter amendment is to identify where there's a fiscal impact. This would obviously have a fiscal impact going from 29 and 25 to 1/2 of the department and assistant director respectively. For 9 council members, assuming those numbers that I gave you originally, our first run on the numbers on January 8th or 18th, the total for the 9 members starting in FY23, all 9 together would be $484,469. So that's the difference between the 25 and 29 versus 1/2 of the numbers I quoted earlier. When 24 rolls around, fiscal year 24 rolls around, we will have 11 council members. So obviously that's 2 additional council members impacted. So that fiscal impact would be $58,923. And that's again, with the numbers, the illustrative numbers from January 18th. So were there actually people in attendance here? I'm sure this is where a lot of questions would be. Hopefully we'll have some before the presentation's done. The remaining 12 amendments are all very technical. Again, these are all items, so it's items G through R. And they're all items, again, that were proposed by our Charter Election Review Committee back in 2016. So for Proposition G, essentially what this would say is when we do our every 10-year redistricting, we don't have to have a meets and bounds description. Now, I will say this was recommended by the Charter Committee. The Charter doesn't explicitly say you have to have meets and bounds, but I guess out of an abundance of caution, the recommendation was we should say that we don't. If you think about it, when you're doing redistricting, saying this side of Riverside or this side of the river or this side of some other identifiable boundary is more useful than saying meets and bounds, 39 degrees north, X minutes and seconds. So this would just say explicitly there's no meets and bounds required when we do redistricting. Proposition H is to address a kind of an odd little thing we have in our charter. Currently, some of the appointed officials, the city secretary, city manager, and city attorney, and all of the department heads have the right to request a hearing before the city council if they are terminated after their 6-year probationary period. Now, the reason I say it's a little odd is the department heads don't work for council. The charter actually says that the council can't direct what happens. Those people work for the city manager, and the charter makes it illegal for council to direct what the people who report to our city manager do. So it's very odd. They would hold a hearing, but they would be in no position to grant relief. It's also a little odd because it doesn't specify a time frame. It doesn't say where you file. It doesn't say how soon after you've been terminated you would have to file. So it creates a lot of questions. And in the time that I've been with the city, almost 16 years now, I believe 2 people have inquired about holding the hearing. I don't know that either one actually ended up with a hearing. So this would eliminate that and say, just repeal all those references to the hearing. Proposition I is to change the time period when individuals want to get something on the ballot and they file a petition, whether they want to have a referendum to adopt an ordinance or to change the charter, or if they want to actually try to recall their council persons. The mechanism for doing that is you file a petition. The city secretary has to review that petition. Currently, they have 10 days to review that petition. When you're talking about potential, let's say, a recall of a citywide office, that's thousands of signatures, and 10 days in order to comply with that requirement would probably require hiring temporary staffing. So this would extend that time period for review of those petitions from 10 days to 25 days. This, again, was a recommendation of that Charter Review Committee. A number of the proposed charter amendments relate to changing things where the charter has not kept up with the current city practice, and this is one of those. So Proposition J would take out, currently our charter says that the finance department is to assess and collect our city taxes. Well, as anyone who's paid their tax bill knows, that you don't write your check to the city of Fort Worth, you write your check to the Tarrant County tax assessor collector. So this amendment would propose taking out that reference, so it would not be listed as a duty of the finance department, and it would comply with our current practice, which is that the county does it. Similarly, keeping up with or updating to catch up with current practice, Proposition K would eliminate the reference that we have currently in our city charter that says the city shall have a Department of Health. The city does still maintain some health functions. Our code compliance department does restaurant inspections and some health functions, but for over a decade, around the 2010 timeframe, if I remember correctly, the city and the county got together and realized, wait, the county is doing health, the city's doing health, maybe we should just have one of us do it, not duplicate efforts. So since that time, most of the public health duties have been handled by our county health department. So this would eliminate the reference that says the city must have a public health department. It's not to say that we couldn't at some point in the future decide to have one. It's not a prohibition against having one. It's just saying we're not required to have one. And that, again, is just to kind of catch up with our current practice. So Proposition L is relating to when the city sells pieces of public property. Currently, the city charter requires that notice to be published 4 times, once a week, every week, in the city newspaper. Publication costs is not inexpensive, and the newspaper doesn't reach, in all honesty, as many people as it used to. So the proposed charter change, again, from the 2016 proposal, would be have a single newspaper publication for people to read the paper, and then for those 4 weeks, put that notice on the city's website and keep it up there for the whole period so that if people are interested in buying the property, they would be aware that that was going on. And this only applies when you're selling property that's worth $125,000 or more. So another cleanup type change is Proposition M. Currently, the city charter says that the city shall impose an assessment for people, for the abutting property owners, if they come in and they do sidewalk and curb work in front of a house or in front of a building. City hasn't actually imposed those assessments for a number of years, so this again would repeal that requirement. It would leave the discretion to have it. It would change it from a shall assess to a may assess. So if a time came when that made sense to do, it could still be done. But it would not be a mandatory requirement, as that has not actually been taking place. Some of the places where our charter is proposed for amendment is just simply to try to make sure we're not conflicting with state law. This is one of those. Currently, our charter has a very specific date by which the tax assessor collector has to submit the tax roll to the city. Right now, the date specified in our charter matches state law, but every 2 years the legislature meets in Austin, and every 2 years they could change those things. So the proposed change here would be to simply say under our charter, whenever you have to submit under the state law, that's the date by which you submit. So we don't end up in a situation where our state law and our charter don't match. Public service corporation reports. So our charter says that public service corporations have to file these reports annually with the city. Again, this is a process that has not actually been employed for a number of years. To the extent this information, you're looking for this information, it's readily available for most of these companies online, either from the state Public Utility Commission or from the companies themselves. And so rather than have the added requirement of having these folks file with our city secretary's office, this would eliminate that entirely. Proposition P, the city's official advertising contract. Currently, under our city charter, under state law, we have to go out, we have to put certain notices, again, in the newspaper, under state law, and those notices have to go to our official paper of record. The charter requires the city to go out for bid and to have a competition for a paper of record every single year. While the idea of a competition amongst papers is nice, the reality is there aren't a lot of papers to compete, and if you have to keep going out for bid, there's a staff time associated with going out for bid, having to renegotiate a new contract. So the recommendation here would be to simply say, instead of an every year contract, it could be a multi-year contract. It just allows at the discretion. So when it seems appropriate in the opinion of the city manager's office that we need to go back out, it's been a while, we should go back out for bid, we would, but we would not be required to go every single year. So hopefully this would increase efficiency and save some money. Almost done. Stick with me. Proposition Q is related to annexation elections. Now this provision, it's interesting to read. It's clearly something that probably dates all the way back to the 1920 charter. Some of the references are very archaic. So this amendment would strip out all of the archaic language, all of the references about the mayor calling an election, which the mayor can't call an election directly anymore, and would simply say, call an election in accordance with state law and mark the ballot. Because right now it says you punch the ballot, and we haven't punched ballots in probably a couple decades. And then our final one, our independent auditors. The city every year engages an independent auditor. They review, they do what's the annual financial comprehensive report. I think I've got those letters out of order. And so they review the city's financials, they review the grant programs. Under our charter, it currently has language that says the auditor must review the budget statements. When our former CFO came on board, we looked at that and we were trying to figure out what that meant, because there aren't, the provision it references doesn't actually include any statements per se. So we've been having the auditor review our budget adoption process, rather than try to make up work to match something in the charter that we're unsure what it means anymore. This provision would revise it and simply say they would perform the normal audit that everyone understands to be part of your comprehensive annual audit and financial report. So it's 13 amendments in 13 minutes, I think. As Roger said, we've got key election dates coming up. We'll be doing these public meetings. I think there's 10 or 11 of them scheduled. Today's the first one. They'll be going through at least April 25th, possibly later. There's additional information about the charter election, including the full text of the ordinance that called the election, which has, a strike-through version of the charter, so you can see exactly what would change, is online, as is some more information, including the presentations that were made to City Council in developing this. The last day to register for vote, for those who are not already registered, is April 7th, which is a month before the election day. First day of early voting will be April 25th. That will run through May 3rd. And then, of course, election day itself will be Saturday the 7th. So there's additional information, as I said, on the website. If you have questions in the interim, you can reach out via the website. There, I believe, going to be dedicated links with an email address so you can submit your questions on the bonds or the charter on the city's webpage. So, Michelle, do we have any questions on the charter election? Really, it's so interesting. All right, well, thank you everyone for coming out. In addition to the meetings that are listed on the schedule, and as Roger said, there's a full list of meetings on the website. There should, I believe, also be a meeting in the box. Is that right, Michelle? Are we doing that this year? Yeah. So there's information where if you have a neighborhood association meeting, you can find online kind of just the basics of what Roger and I presented, so y'all can go through it yourselves. And if you have a group that you would like folks to come to speak to, probably not on the charter because it's not that interesting, but if you'd like to have ask folks out to speak, you can also submit that to Michelle Good, our communications director, to get something set up. So with that, as there are no questions and no one in the room is not city staff, y'all have a good evening.